They called him too slow. 18 months later, the man who fired him was standing in a parking lot at 11 p.m., scrolling through an old company directory, trying to remember if Walter Briggs still had the same phone number. Walter was 61, 32 years at Calloway Industrial, a stamping and tooling plant outside a small Ohio town where half the people on his street had worked a shift there at some point in their lives. He wasn't management, he was maintenance, the man who could put his palm flat on a humming press and tell you, before any gauge could, that something was 11 days from failing. Then a private equity group bought the plant. The new regional manager was named Mark Delgado. 34 years old, sharp suit, a man who'd been told by people above him that this plant was underperforming and that fixing it would be the thing that finally got him out of regional roles and into corporate. He had a spreadsheet. On it, technicians were ranked by average ticket close time. Walter sat at the bottom, 22 minutes slower per repair than the median, a number that meant nothing on the page and everything on the floor because Walter diagnosed root causes while the younger guys patched symptoms and waited for the next breakdown. Mark didn't know that distinction existed. Nobody had explained it to him, and to be fair, nobody had asked him to understand it. He'd been hired to cut, not to learn machines. "Walter, I'll be straight with you," Mark said, not quite meeting his eyes. "Your numbers are the outlier on this team. We're restructuring around efficiency benchmarks. I have to let you go." Walter nodded once. He'd seen grown men cry in that office and get walked out by security anyway, so he didn't bother. He cleaned out his locker, a coffee mug, a photo of his late wife Carol, and a spiral notebook, soft at the edges from 3 decades of handling. Inside it, in his cramped handwriting, which valve on line 4 is stuck in cold weather. Why Press 7's calibration drifted every August when the building's foundation shifted with the heat. The exact torque sequence on the older Hodgman dies that wasn't in any manual because Hodgman went out of business in 1994. Mark watched him pack the notebook into a grocery bag and didn't ask what was in it. That would turn out to be the most expensive thing he never asked. 3 weeks after Walter left, Press 7 threw an error code at 6:40 a.m. The technician on shift, a 26-year-old named Caleb who'd been hired specifically for his speed, pulled up the manual on his tablet. The manual said, "Replace the sensor." He replaced the sensor. The press ran for 40 minutes and seized again, harder this time, bending a die worth $40,000. Nobody told Caleb that Press 7 didn't actually have a sensor problem in August. It had a foundation problem. The plant's concrete pad shifted 0.5 millimeter in summer heat, throwing the press's alignment off by a fraction nobody but Walter had ever bothered to measure and record. It was page 14 of a notebook sitting in a kitchen drawer 4 miles away. The line was down for 2 days. A client named Reyes Automotive, who needed those stamped brackets for a delivery deadline, called twice. The second call, the plant manager took on speaker so the floor could hear how it went. The Reyes rep didn't yell. He just said flatly, "We've used you for 9 years. We've never had 2 misses in a month before this year. What changed?" Nobody had a good answer, because the honest answer was a name nobody wanted to say out loud yet. A month later it happened again. Different machine, same root cause. Institutional memory that used to live in one man's head, now simply gone. A coolant mixture ratio that Walter adjusted seasonally by feel was left at the factory default. 2 motors burned out within a week of each other. The replacement parts were back-ordered 6 weeks because the supplier Walter used to call directly, a guy named Frank he'd known since 1996, didn't take calls from people he didn't recognize, and the new hires didn't know Frank existed. By the 3rd month, unplanned downtime wasn't a line item anymore. It was the headline of every weekly call with corporate. Reyes Automotive pulled their contract entirely. 11 years of business, gone in 1 email citing reliability concerns. That single account had been worth enough to cover 4 technicians' full salaries. Calloway didn't have 4 technicians' worth of margin to lose. Mark Delgado started losing sleep, not metaphorically. He told his wife he was waking up at 3 a.m. running numbers in his head. His own boss had started CCing the VP of operations on emails that used to just go to Mark. That's corporate for, your name is now attached to this failure personally. It was a Tuesday in month 4 when Mark finally went down to the floor himself, something regional managers almost never did, because Press 4 had gone down during a run for their second largest remaining client, and there was no Walter, no notebook, and no Frank. Caleb was standing in front of the open panel, sweating, 3 different troubleshooting forums open on his phone. "I don't know what's wrong with it," he said. "It's not in the manual. It's not throwing a normal code." Mark stood there in his sharp suit, useless, watching a $30,000 an hour line sit dead, and he thought clearly for the first time about the grocery bag Walter had carried out the door 11 months earlier. He'd watched it happen. He hadn't asked a single question. He drove home that night, sat in his car in his own driveway for 20 minutes, and looked up Walter Briggs in the old employee directory, which technically he wasn't supposed to still have access to. He didn't call the next morning. He waited 2 more days, partly out of pride, partly because he was trying to figure out what he could possibly say that wouldn't sound exactly as hollow as it was. When he finally called, Walter was in his garage fixing a neighbor's lawnmower carburetor on a Saturday, radio playing low. "Walter, it's Mark Delgado." A pause. "From Calloway." "I remember," Walter said. Not cold, just plain. "I'm not going to waste your time pretending this is a courtesy call," Mark said. "We lost Reyes. We're losing Brennan Tool next if we don't fix our downtime numbers, and that's 40% of what's left. I went down to the floor myself Tuesday and stood there for 2 hours while nobody could tell me what was wrong with a machine you would have fixed in 20 minutes. I should have asked what was in that notebook before you left. I didn't. That's on me." Walter wiped his hands on a rag and didn't say anything for a moment. Carol used to tell him his silences made people nervous. He let this one sit. "What exactly are you asking me?" Walter finally said. "I'm asking you to come back. Not as an hourly tech, I can't undo what we did, and frankly, you shouldn't let me pretend to. As a consultant, your rate, your terms, training the team properly this time. I'll put it in writing before you say yes, not after." Walter didn't answer that day. He thought about it for 4 days, which Mark spent in something close to genuine dread. When Walter finally walked back onto that floor, he didn't make a speech. He went straight to press 7, opened the panel, and pulled the grocery bag notebook out of his jacket pocket, the same one now held together with a rubber band. "Page 14, he said to Caleb, flipping it open. "Building shifts in August heat. 0.5 millimeter, realign here, here, and here." He showed him. 20 minutes later, the press ran clean. Caleb stared at the notebook like it was a cheat code to a game he'd been losing for months. "Nobody told me that existed." "Nobody asked," Walter said, not unkindly, just true. And Mark, standing a few feet away, heard it land exactly where it was meant to. Here's what made it different from just another comeback story. Walter didn't simply return and fix everything quietly while the company pretended the firing never happened. His first condition in writing was that the notebook itself, copied, organized, digitized, became part of a real training manual with his name on it, so the next time someone left, the company wouldn't lose 32 years overnight again. His second condition was that Caleb, the kid who'd been set up to fail with a manual that never had the real answers, got formally trained under him, paid, on the clock, not blamed for a system that was never built to let him succeed. Mark agreed to both without negotiating. It was, by his own later admission, the first time in his career he'd signed something without trying to talk the number down. The efficiency metrics program was quietly retired within the year, not with an announcement, just gone, the way bad ideas tend to disappear once the cost of them shows up in writing. Walter never got an apology that sounded like much more than what Mark gave him in that one phone call. He didn't need a bigger one. He'd already gotten the thing that actually mattered, proof, recorded in black and white, that what he carried in his head for 32 years was worth more than any spreadsheet ever measured. Some people aren't slow, they're just keeping the only copy of something everyone else forgot to write down. If this got you in the chest, there are more stories like Walter's coming. The next one's about a woman who got passed over for promotion 11 times before the company found out exactly what she'd been quietly building on the side.